Abiy Ahmed carry out a genocide?
I will tell you this.
بحثر زبالك حتى كا أبي أحمد genocide فتيمو ديو أي فتمن.
As a lawyer, I cannot say who did this and that, but the crime was committed in Tigray.
You're a lawyer?
Yeah.
Were you not?
كم تبغى عنا حجي أبي أحمد كم زفتيمو أي فتمن كبل أي كلني كزعربس أي كلني I cannot كبل أي كلني. أبزي كم research جرت أني حقول مقرب دقائق تبغى يكون ناي حق إلى قبل كوين يسمعني.
Not a lawyer in 2021 when you said Abiy Ahmed has carried out a genocidal campaign.
Yeah. بقول تشن عشان حدا قلنا تبغى يكون كان نيركا وين حق إلى نبر كان شعوان دكتور أبي أحمد إذا بزي genocide على حزب تجري فتيمو تقول كلها.
I was
a lawyer when you said Abiy committed genocide on the people of Tigray.
I was a lawyer and I was in the heat of a conflict that was claiming the lives of hundreds of thousands of people.
What أبغى يعني رأ شعوان قن أبحاز يحمى خنا تاتنا نيرنا حزبنا هاي تأفني هالق النيرو لازم نستوعيزنا برخناتات جدا. سلام كرات قاتلتي لو معلتي Getachew ردا مس مهدي حسن تقبل انترفيو اب الجزيرة زغربة ببزح حساب زاربول زلو زي انترفيو زغن بلكعته فول فيديو ببحاده ناقلسني هانكيدنا سنة مكتال بمجمرتا مهدي حسن امني الجزيرة سرح انترفيو وركوينو ناتو زيتو زبل ناي يوتيوب channel لو او استفالي حتوتات اتي كبيد ويدما هارد زخون questions حتت نبوزحات عبيت حلفت زحاتته حدا هابتم معلمنا فلوطاتن حيالاتن غازيتنياتات تباهيلي زفلت لومي مس Getachew ردا زغور انترفيو بمجمرتا مغلصيو اب 2018 ናብ ኢትዮጵያ ለውጥ ከም ዘጋጠመ እቲ ለውጥ ሓድሽ ፕራይም ሚኒስተር ከም ተመርጸ ዚ ፕራይም ሚኒስተር ከዓ ዶክተር አቢይ አህመድ ከም ዝኾነ ዶክተር አቢይ አህመድ ብናይ ህዝቢ ምርጫ ዝተመርጸ ኮይኑ ቅድሚውን ልዕሊ 30 ዓመት ግን ኢትዮጵያ ብናይ TPLF ናይ Tigray People Liberation Front ትምራሕ ከም ዝነበረት እዩ ዝገልጽ ዘሎ ሕጂ ቀጣና ኣብቲ ኢንተርቪው ንቶ እቲ ኣገዳሲ ዝኾነ ናይዛ ኢንተርቪው ቃላቲና ሃንገልጾ ቀጣ ቃል ንቃል ደኮነ እቲ ዋና እንታይ ተባሂልና ሃንገልጽ ሰናይ ምክታል
Viewed hostilities and the threat of a wider conflict. I'm Mehdi Hassan and tonight I go head to head with Getachew Reda on his new alliance with former arch nemesis Abiy Ahmed and whether Ethiopia and Eritrea are on the brink of another war.
ሎሚ ሓያል ዝኾነ ኢንተርቪው ክንገብርና ምስ Getachew Reda ምስ Getachew Reda ንገብር ኢንተርቪው ከዓ ሓደ ቀዳማይ ክሓትር ዘለዎ ምስ ኤርትራስ ውግእ ክህሉ ድዩ ከምኡኻ እቲ ናይ ቀደም ጸላኢኡ ዝነበረ አቢይ አህመድ ናቱ ምስኡ ስራሕ ወይ ክሰርሕ ምሕሳቡሲ ንምንታዩ ኢሉ ክሓቶ እዩ
Tonight, I'll also be joined by our panel of experts. Sidale Lema, journalist and editor of the Addis Standard newspaper, Kjetil Tronvoll, professor of peace and conflict studies at Oslo New University College, and Bisrat Lemessa, founder of the think tank Nexus Forum for Research and Dialogue.
እዞም ትሪኦም ዘለኹም ፈላጣት እዮም ብዛዕባ ናይ ጉዳይ ኤርትራ ኢትዮጵያ ብሓፈሻ ናይ ኤርትራ ኢትዮጵያ ናይ ኢስት ኣፍሪካ ፈላጣት ኮይኖም እዞም ሰባት እዚኦም ከዓ ኣብዚ መደብ ዝምሳና ክሕወሱና እዮም
Getachew Reda, thank you for joining me on Head to Head tonight.
My pleasure.
You are currently serving as a government minister and an advisor to Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Abiy, as you know, is a controversial, some would say divisive political figure in your country. His critics say he's a tyrant, he's a grift.
ኣብ ሰዓት እዚ ምስ ዶክተር አቢይ ከማ ማኻሪ ኾንካ ትሰርሕ ኣለኻ አቢይ ከዓ ዝተፋለየ ሽም ክርቦ ንኽእልና ወይ ሽም ክንጠምቆ ንኽእልና ሓደ ፈላላይ ኢልና ክንጠቕሶ ንኽእል
He's dismembering Ethiopia. What's your response to people who make those criticisms of your boss?
እዞም ብዙሓት ሰባት ስኒ ዶክተር አቢይ ከም እዚ ሃገር እዚኣ ፈላልያ ከም ዘሎን ሕንፍሽፍሸት ወላ ከም ዘሎን እዮም ዝገልጹ ንስኻ ብኸመይ ትገልጾ ወይ ብኸመይ ትሪኦ ነዚ ጉዳይ እዚ
Not most of the things I have said all along the last couple of years, the last few years. So after having signed the Traitor agreement and submitting ourselves to the constitution because we have to put an end to the war, and after having served as interim president of Tigray for 2 years, we have come to a point where we have to work closely with the Prime Minister, whatever our political differences.
هو أنا ونبعليش نخلت عامة خون كوم إلي تقصن يرى أنت خون لكن دحر بريتوريا مفرامنا نحنا نسلام سلندلي قدنا مسون سرح زلنا لا سوي كام مسون سرح دلنا ما تو سلام سلندلي
You recognize that you're the person who called him a tyrant, a grifter, dismembering Ethiopia.
تذكري خامش نسخة هاجن دكتور أبيسي تايرانت قتالي هاجرات فاي نزه هاجر زي السلام دخل أدولو الكادبل تصوع كياسي كالوت كمان يكون نسخة هو توسخون كالوني ليه مور كمان سي ليه
And more. You did go more. You actually accused him of committing the crime of crimes, genocide, against your people, against the Tigrayans.
ካልውን ኢልካ ኢኻ ቀፂልካ እውን ጀኖሳይድ ኣብ ልዕሊ ህዝቢ ትግራይ ከም ዝፈጸመ እውን ጠቂስካ ነርካ
during the recent civil war. According to you, Abiy's forces even tried to assassinate you via drone strike, and they abducted and detained your sister. How does your sister feel about you working with people who abducted her? Must make for an awkward family dinner.
ከም ዝገለጽካ እንተ ደኣ ኮይኑ ዶክተር አብይ አሕመድ ወይ ድማ ናቱ ሰራዊት ንዓኻ ከጥፍኡኻ ብናይ ድሮን ገይሮም ኣሳሲኔሽን ኣብ ልዕሊኻስ ቅትለት ክፍጽሙ ከም ዝፈቶን ኢኻ ትገልጽ ከምኡውን ንሓፍትኻ ከም ድጨወይ ዋይኻ ተዛሪብካ ነርካ ሕጂ ሰዓት እዚ ግን ንስኻ ምስ ዶክተር አብይ ትሰርሕ ኣለኻ ኣብ ፋሚሊኹም ተኣኪብኩም ክድረሩ ከለኹም ሓፍትኻስ እንታይ ይስማዕ ይኸውን ንስኻ ምስትንዓኻ ድጨወየ ክትሰርሕ ምፍታንካስ እንታይ ይስማዕ ይኸውን ብጣዕሚ ምድንጋር ፈጥርዎ ንምራብ ትውሽጢ ገዛኹም ዳ
My sister would feel the pain of having to go through the kinds of problems you had to face. But I think it would be fair to say that my sister is going to feel relieved that the kinds of sufferings she had to go through, people would not have to go through anymore.
You fell out with your old partner.
ሕጂ ሓፍተይ እወ ሕማቅ ክስማዕ ይኽእል እዩ ናይ ግድን እንተኾነ ግን ሓፍተይ ኣብ ሰዓት እዚ ተሃገር ናብ ዝሓሸ ደረጃ ንኽትምለስ ዘጋጠመ ንዓ ዘጋጠማ ንኻልእ ንኸየጋጥሞ ድሓን ይስማዕ ኮይኑ ይስማዓኒ
The Tigrayan People's Liberation Front, the TPLF, they ousted you. And then you went and joined Abiy Ahmed. You didn't have to join the other side. You could have just said, you know what, I'm done with all of you.
Yeah, one of the
ምስ ትግራይ TPLF ትሰርሕ ነርካ ድሓር ግን ንሶም ነፂሎም ኢኻ ምስ ነፀሉኻ ግን ናብቶም ቀንዲ ፀላእትኹም ዝነበሩሲ ናብኦም ከድካ ክትስራሕ ጀሚርካ ኣብ ትሕቲ ዶክተር አብይ ማለት እዩ ማለት ግድን ዲኻ ምሶም ክሰርሕ ነርካ ክትገርፎም እኮ ትኽእል ነርካ ኢኻ ግድን ኣይኮነንኩም ምስ ፀላእኻ ክትሰርሕ
things I knew I had to do was to make sure that my erstwhile friends, my comrades, who for one reason or another, of course, that would include myself too, led to the kinds of suffering the people of Tigray had to suffer because of their failure in leadership, should not be allowed to continue to enjoy the kind of totalitarian control over the people of Tigray. So as long as there was a possibility, indeed, a likelihood of working closely with the federal government, not to spite the people of Tigray, but to protect the interests of the people of Tigray.
ሕጂ ንእቶም ህዝቢ ትግራይ ሲ ብዝኾነ ይኹን መንገዲ ክሳቅዩ ኣይደልን ኣነ ንዕኦም ክሕግዝ ዝኽእል መንገዲ ተሎ ክሰርሕ ከም ዘለኒ ዝኣምን ሕጂ ዋላ ንሶም ምስኦም ክሰርሕ ኳ ተዘይፈቀዱለይ እንተኾነ ግን ምስ ፌደራል መንግስቲ ኮይነ ኣብ ልዕሊ ህዝቢ ትግራይ ይስሊ ማለት ኣይኮነ እንተኾነ ግን ንዕኦም ንጥቕሚ ህዝቢ ትግራይ ክሰርሕ ግን ናተይ ግዴታ ኣለኒ
Hold on, Getachew. You're working with the federal government. That you spent
حنسا اسكي Getachew. حنسا اسمعني مو مس federal government تسرح الله كألك حنسا اسمعني
years calling war criminals. You said Abiy Ahmed, and I'm quoting you, perfected genocide into an art form. Do you stand by those genocide accusations?
حنسا انه Getachew كحتى كان سخاكون Abiy Ahmed إذا سبزي قتاليو genocide على حزب تجرايسي زي جبريل كي حخسيش كان يركع. بس خص زي بسبب حجي أولي خد لها ويصير غير كي حسب الله.
Walk them back. Now that you work with.
Whatever the superlatives there, I know all kinds of crimes were committed in Tigray.
استبهال يبقى هالحاجة superlative مالت استجاننا قال على مالت adjective نمنتها بس قالت يوفلت نيجن استبهال يبقى
Abiy Ahmed carry out a genocide.
I will tell you this.
بحثر زبالة حتى كا Abiy Ahmed genocide فتي موديو أي فتمن.
This as a lawyer, I cannot say who did this and that, but the crime was committed in Tigray.
You're a lawyer.
Yeah.
كم طبق عنا حجي Abiy Ahmed كم زفتيمو أي فتمن قبل أي كلني كزاربس أي كلني أي كانت قبل أي كلني. أبزي كم research جرت أني حقول مغرب دقيقة طبق أي كونه نايحق إلى قبل كوين يسمعني.
Not a lawyer in 2021 when you said Abiy Ahmed has carried out a genocidal campaign.
بقدر عشان عشان حدا قلنا طبق يكون كان نركع وين يحق إلى نبر كان شعوان دكتور Abiy Ahmed إذا سبزي genocide على حزب تجراي فتيمو تبلك لها.
I was
a lawyer when you said Abiy committed genocide on the people of Tigray.
I was a lawyer and I was in the heat of the conflict that was claiming the lives of hundreds of thousands of people.
What طبق يعني را شعوان قن عبحازي حما زخنا خناتاتنا نيرنا حزبنا هاي تفني حلق النيرو. لازم نستوعيزنا برخناتات جدا.
Genocide or not?
هجيب بحثر زبالك حتى كاي حتى حتى Abiy Ahmed genocide فتيمون هاي فتسمن اسك قوة ويلا نقبلني
believe genocide has been committed in Tigray
by Abiy Ahmed.
يأمني أنا على حزب تجراي genocide كم تفتسمه مهدي تقبل أبيلو Abiy Ahmed ديو.
Well, I have to be responsible for my words now.
So you weren't responsible.
And I am ready.
وحجي أب ساعات زين تتنك أخزار بالني زبل قالت حرقة خمسة على يخيلي. I have to be careful. أب زرار بايسي كتنك على النيلو. شعوخ حلفنت كوسرا لين بقالاتي يدو ما قدم كده اخل تشحن 21 كبابي كتزارب كلخا بزعبا زي قداي زي حلفنت توسد نركا مادينا قالاتكا
to stand by my position that genocide has been committed.
I'm confused. Just to clarify for the audience watching, you still believe it was a genocide, but you're not willing to say he did the genocide.
Yes.
It was a genocide.
حاجي مدين قال كيف تر حنسب ولا حنت تحاوشنا له كونفيوز غير كان لها عب تግራይ جينوسايد تفصيمو تفصمن كحتى كالله اودينسنا متان كيدناغر هو تفصيمو تبلالها من فصيمون زبل حتو ግን እዚ ክትብል አይደለخنا لها እስሪት حقي هو
It just happened by itself.
No,
genocide ባዓሉ ተፈጽሙ ማለት ዲዩ በዘይ ሰብ ከይፈጸመ
there were so many actors involved.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is
was he one of them?
Well, the war on Tigray was led by Prime Minister Abiy.
ብዙሓት ኣባላት እዮም ነዚ ተሳቲፎም ብዙሓት ተራ ተጻወቱ ለው ነዚ ጀኖሳይድ ኣብ ምፍጻም እሞንሱ ሓደ ካብኣቶም ዲዩ ናይ ፌደራል ወታደራት እዮም ነይሮም
Ahmed himself.
So he led the genocide.
እቲ እቶም ወታደራት ኮ ናይ አብይ አሕመድ መሪሕነት ናይ አብይ አሕመድ ትእዛዝ ተኣዚዞም እዮም ሰርሑ ነይሮም
I mean, we wouldn't have to be that specific.
We do.
He led the war.
That's why we
بتعامل ولا نسوم قريمو مهنيات أبزنا يقال حنفش تفتيرو جن directly أما نسودي فتيمو نسودي هاتي بدي لها هونكا مالسي معرخون دو جدا دي نسوخ بدي خالد اللي خان زلها مالسي من يجر ود أمو خن بدي لها يلي حتى ولا مهدي
He led the war.
He led the war.
Okay نتوج دمر حسن السيو
Give him the opportunity to defend himself in public, in court.
Okay.
What I'm saying is all kinds of crimes.
You mentioned
crimes, ethnic cleansing, genocide were committed.
So you're right.
استفلا علي جبنا على حزب تقرأ تفتيميو.
There were well-documented war crimes committed by the federal government, by Eritrean troops, by Amhara militias.
استفلا علي جبنا تفتيميو على حزب تقرأ بناي ميليشيا جروب إليز حتى زلا.
Rights organizations in the United Nations also documented massacres of hundreds of people, including civilians, by Tigrayan forces, by your side. At the time, you labeled those claims, quote, a figment of someone's imagination.
United Nations abz glotso magletz ግን ዋላቶም ወታደራት ትግራይ ሲን ህዝብ ከም ደጥፉ ይዝገልጽ ዘሎ እስኻ ግን ነዚ ሓሶት ኢልካ ሓገሊጽካዮ
And you called it a staged drama. Can you now admit that you were lying at the time to cover up war crimes?
ሕጂ ኣብቲ ሽዑ ሰዓት ድበልካያሲ ወታደራትካ ከም ዝፈጺሞም ኣጥፊኦም ህዝቡ ክበሃል ከሎ እዚ ድራማ እዩ ስቴጅ ድገበርኩም ወይ ድሰርሕኩም ኢልካ ነርካ ሽዑ ግን ኣብ ሕማቅ ኮንትራት ስለ ዝነበርካ ተዛረብካዮ ድዩ እስከ ሓቂ ንገረና
I was making a statement defending our decisions that there was no systematic attack against civilians by the Tigrayan forces, but to the extent that there were incidents, we were ready to hold ourselves accountable to any international tribunal. So when I say...
You said at the time, these are just a figment of someone's imagination. There was no such thing as our forces going in every house and targeting civilians. They fought and our forces fought back. That sounds like a...
ስለዚ ኣብቲ ሽዑ ሰዓት ድበልካያሲ ሓቂ ዲ ሓሶት ክትነግረኒ ትኽእልኒ ኢኻ
in the benefit of hindsight, I can see cases here and there where civilians were targeted.
Yes. One man said he counted 50.
ሓደ ክልተ ኬዛት ነይሩ ክኸውን ይኽእሉ ሓደ ክልተ ኬዛት እንትኾነ ግን ብብዝሒ ከምዚ ኣይነበረን ሓደ ክልተ ኢሉ መሄደሾ ሓደ ክልተ እስከ ሓደ ካብቲ ታሪክ ከንብበሉ እዩ
5 corpses as he escaped from his town in northern Ethiopia. He stepped over bodies scattered in the streets. Another asserted he was rounded up with 20 men who were shot in front of him. Yet others claimed Tigrayan forces went door to door, killing men and teenage boys. That happened on your watch.
እስኻ ኣብ ሓላፍነት ከለኻሲ ብዙሓት ናይ ትግራይ ሰራዊት ካብ ገዛ ኳሕኪሖም ከም ድቆተሉን ከም ደጽነቱን ዝገልጽ ጽሑፍ ኣሎ ሓደ ሰብ ከም ዝገለጾ ንህይወት ንኸድሕን ዝሞቱ ሬሳታት እናረገጸ እናሃደመ እዩ ነብሱ ኣድሒንዋ ስለዚ እዚ ሓደ ክልተ ኬዝ ድዩ እዚ ኮ ብዙሕ እዩ
Well, to say that it happened under my watch, under circumstances, would be a bit of a stretch. But when I say...
أنا أبتحتي وحلفنت كل خز قد إذا أقاطي مختبل كلها مالتي ما stretchy يبلالو.
No such decision was made against civilians. I still stand by it because there was no decision to target civilians. But
ስለዚህ ኣብ ልዕሊ civilians والحاجة وسانة وما مغزفتي أي وسنان. أنت هون كمعات وسانة أي وسنان.
As long as there were off-grid officers here and there who have targeted civilians, I'll be more than glad to assume my fair share of responsibility.
ገለገለ ወታደራት ግን ነዚ ጉዳይ ፈጺሞሞ እንተ ደኣ ኮይኖም ብናቶም ወለንታ ዝፈጽሞ እንተ ደኣ ኮይኑ responsibility ሓላፍነት ክወስድ ግን ድልወ
To be fair, you recently exposed an internal TPLF investigation that accuses 231 of your former leaders and affiliates of crimes, including human trafficking, abductions, gold and weapon smuggling.
ቅድሚ ቁርብ እዋን ኸውን ላዕሊ 200 ዝኾኑ መሳርሕትካ ዝነበሩ ሓለፍቲ ዝነበሩ ኣብ abduction ሰብ ናይ ጩያ ስርቂ ከምኡ ናይ ወርቅ ምሕታት human trafficking እዚ ሁሉ ጋጢሙ እንተኾነ ግን ክሳብ ሕጂ ኣይቃልዓካዮምን ስለምንታይ
but you waited to reveal it
honestly
how do we know you weren't involved in this
honestly
ንስኻ ኣብዚ ጉዳይ ሲ ኢድ ከም ዘይነበረካስ ብኸመይ ነረጋግጽ
I wasn't involved in the crimes because
you
I wasn't because I wasn't but I knew
that's not really good defense I wasn't
ኣብዚ ጉዳይ እዚ ኢድ ኣይነበረንን ምክንያቱ ኢድ ኣይነበረንን እዚ ቁኑዕ መልሲ ኮነን ክብል መህድኻ መሊስሉ እንታይ ማለት እዩ ኣነ ነበርኩን
involved in the
I was after having spent months as president of the interim administration it came to my knowledge that these kinds of activities were quite
but you didn't reveal it you waited
ኣብ መሰጋገሪ መንግስቲ መራሒ ኮይነ ናይ ፕሬዝዳንት ናይ ትግራይ ኣብ ስራሕ ኩሉ እዋን እዚ ጉዳይ ዘጋጥም ከም ዘሎ ኣብ መጪን ወይ ፈሊጠ ወይ ሰሚዐ ብድሕሪኡ ኣነ ከቃልዖ ተገዲደ
waited till this year
because
ሳግን ሕጂ ከተቃልዖ ደለኻ እኮ እዚ ጉዳይ ዘጋጠመሉ ቅድም እዩ ኣብ ድሽዑ ሰዓት ደይቃልዓከ ስለምንታይ ሕጂ ምስ ወጻኻ ተቃልዖ ለሃ እዚ ጉዳይ
we believed in the TPLF that maintaining a modicum of unity was far more important than addressing our internal problems and that
ኣብ ድሽዑ ሰዓት ንሕና ካብ ፀጋማትና መቀላዓሲ ሓድነት ክህልወና ግዴታ ኮይኑ ተሰሚዕና ወይ ኣድላይ ኮይኑ ተሰሚዕና ዳስ ዋይ ደይቃልዓና ወይ ኤክስፖዝ ደይገበርናዮ
I mean, human trafficking is not an internal problem, it's a major crime.
When I first decided to
human trafficking እኮ ከምዚ ውሽጣዊ ፀገም ኣይኮነን ኣዝዩ ዓባዓብ ዝኾነ ገበን እዩ እዚ ኻ ጩያ ማለት ንሓደ ሰብ ጩይኻ ገንዘብ ሃብት ብሎ ማለት እዩ
to bring those not just accusations but also evidence to light well my responsibility was to make sure the people who were in the business of adjudicating these cases were informed and it's not like I can go door to door and prosecute myself
but you exposed 231 people
but I did the exposing
ንስኻግን ልዕሊ 231 ዝኾኑ ሰባት ኣቃሊዕካ ኢኻ
way ahead of my being ousted as interim president
ቅድሚ ምስ ጓገይ የኮነ ዝግና ቃሊዕዮም ዞም ሰባት እዚኦም ሲ ቅድሚ ካብ TPLF ምስ ጓገይ እዞም ሰባት ዝቃሊዕዮም ዘለኹ
you admitted earlier this year that you lied up until now I tolerated this
I tolerated
ማለት ሲ ክስኻግን ክሳብ ሎማ ዓመት ግን እዚ ሳይስ ሓሲኻ ማለት እዩ ኖ ሓሲኮ ይኮንኩን ቶለሬት ገይረ ተጻዊሮየ ወይ ተጸሚመ ኖ ሓሶት እዚ ኢሉኻ
You said you lied.
No, I didn't lie.
You said earlier this year, it is enough that I lied up to now and I tolerated up to now.
ክሳብ ሎም ግን እንታይ ኢልካ ክሳብ ሕጂ ዝሓስኹ ኣኽለኒ ኢልካ ነርካ ኖ ኣይ ሓስኹን ኢልዎ በዓልኻ ወቂኻ ክሳብ ሎም ዝሓስኹ ኣኽለኒ ሎም ከቃልዑ እዚ ጉዳይ እዚ ኢልካ
Those are your words.
Well,
you lying about having lied.
ከም ዝዕዘብዎ ዘለኹም እቶም ሰባት ብጣዕሚ ገሪሞም ኣሚዞም ኮይኖም ናስሓቆዮም ሰምዑ ደሎ ምክንያቱ ተጋራጫዊ ዘረባታት ሽዑ ዝበሎን ሕጂ ዝብሎ ዘሎን ተጋራጫዊ ኮይኑ
translated those things to you must have overstated their case
what would you say to someone in this audience who says
ዝኾነ ይኹን ሰብ ነዚ ጉዳይ ዝተርጎመልካ ወሳሲኹ ክኸውን ይኽእል እዩ ኢልዎ
You exposed 231 people in your party for committing crimes. Conveniently, none of the 231 were you.
ክልተሚትን ሰላሳን ሓደን ዝኾኑ ሰባት ካብትናትካ ፓርቲ ዝነበሩ ናይ TPLF ማለት ኣቃሊዕካ እዮም ወይ ገበነኛት ምዃኖም ገልጽካ ንስኻ ግን ኣብ ሽምካ ኣብዚ ጠቐስካን ስለምንታይ
Fortunately for whoever was making those claims I wasn't one of them It's as simple as that
Okay
ኣነ ኣብዚ ጉዳይ እዚ
peace signed in 2022
ኣነ ኣብዚ ጉዳይ እዚ ኢድ ኣይነበረንን ሲምፕል ካ ኢድ ኣይነበረንን በቃ እሱ ይትሓቂ
That pledged justice for millions of people who suffered during the war in Tigray. It's been 3 years and none of the key promises have been fulfilled. None of the major players have been held accountable for war crimes. In fact, many of them are still in positions of power. Last month, you met with Amhara official Demeke Zudu, who Human Rights Watch has said continued the ethnic cleansing in Western Tigray even after the ceasefire.
ደመቀ ገብሩ ዝተባሃለ ክሳብ ሕጂ ቅድሚ 3 ዓመት ዝሃብኩሞ መብጻዕታት ክሳብ ሕጂ ፈጸምኩሞ ዘለኹም እቲ ብናይ ፕሪቶሪያ ምስ ተፈረመ ማለት እዩ ክሳብ ሕጂ ከዓ ስቲል እዚ ጉዳይ እዚ ይቕጽል ኣሎ ስለዚ ሲ እንታይ ጽበይ ኣለኹም
including quote arbitrary detention, torture, forced deportations. How can Tigrayans possibly believe that you are working in their best interest when you're meeting one of the men who's responsible for them having lost their land?
Is that unheard of?
ትግራይ ሲ ከመይ ዳኽት ኣምነካ ትኽእል እቶም ንትግራይ ከጥፉ ዝመፁ ወይ ኣካላት ወይ ኣባላት ምስኦም ንስኻ ትሰርሕ እንትርኢ ኣለኻ እስከመይ ኢላ ትግራይ ንስኻስ ንዕኦም ኢልካ ትስዕር ወይ ትሰርሕ ከም ዘለኻ ክትኣምን ትኽእል
swear if you are interested in resolving this crisis you have to deal with people who are in charge now I believe the federal government needs to dismantle any Amhara administration in occupied areas in Western Tigray and other parts of Tigray
እንተዳ ህዝቢ ትግራይ ክትሕግዝ ኮንካ ምስቶም ኣብ ሓላፍነት ዘለዉ ሰሪሕካ ክትሕኖ ትኽእል
that are still occupied by the Amhara. And if I have to make sure that the people have their opportunity to come back home, you have to work with the federal government and work with people.
እንተራ ህዝብና ናብ መሬት ክምለስ ኮይኑ ምስቲ ሓላፍነት ዘሎ ፌደራል government ክንሰርሕ ግዴታና እዩ
seem to change your tune. You have to change your tune.
No, I have to swallow my pride.
Not just swallow your pride, you're changing your very view of the world. This is what you said a year ago.
No, I'm not.
ቅድሚ ዓመት ዝበልካዮ ዘረባ ክደግ መልክዕ ሓንሳብ
anyone.
This is what you said a year ago. It would be very foolhardy for us to expect internally displaced persons to enter when the very people who caused their displacement in the first place are still roaming the very streets we saw the carnival.
ቅድሚ ዓመት ዝበልካዮ እንታይ ይመስለካ እዞም ኩሎም ሃብ ሃገሮም ተሰጊጎም ተማዛቢሎም ዘለው ንመሬቶም ክምለሱ እንተዳ ኮይኖም እቲ ንዖም ዘማዛበሎም እዚ ብዝመሪሕነት ዘሎ ፌደራል government still ኣብ መሪሕነት ከሎ ክምለሱ ተስፋ የለን ኢልካ ነርካ ሕጂ ግን ኩምሎሱ ኮይኖም ምስቶም ፌደራል government ክንሰርሓልና ትብላለሃ ኣብስ ምግሪ ጫሮ የለን ትብሎ ዘለኻ ስጋራ ጮካሪ የለን
sitting down with those people.
This is one of the arguments we have with the federal government when I was head of the interim administration is for that Amhara administration to be dismantled and for security to be taken care of by the federal government along with traditional militia and police institutions that had been there before the war, and I haven't changed my position. Demaka Zodu should not be in the business of administering that area, but if I have to create the ground for the return of IDPs with the federal government and have to continue to work with people like him.
Many እዚ ደመቀ ዘውዱ ዝበሃል ኣብ መሪሕነት ኩሉ አይግቦን ግን ኣብ መሪሕነት እንተዳሎ ንህዝበይ ከድሕል ሙስቕ ሰርሕ ግዴታ ኣለኒ
Tigrayans, you know this, see you as a traitor. Thousands of people in Tigray went to the battlefield and they died. They were killed in war based on your call to arms. You urged young Tigrayans to, quote, rise and deploy to battle in tens of thousands. What do you say to the people of Tigray today who were victims of the war and who now think you betrayed them by joining the architect of their suffering, Abiy Ahmed?
There are two things here.
ብዙሓት ተጋሩሲ ንስኻ በቲ ዝሃብ ዝበልካዮ ንመሬትኩም ህዝብኩም ተቃለሱ ምስበልካ ወፂኦም ምእንቲ መሬቶም ምእንቲ ህዝቦም ተቃሊሶም ኣብ ሰዓት እዚ ግን እቲ ጸላይኦም ዝነበረት ብሎ ዝነበርካ ፌደራል government እስኻ ሙስቕ ትሰርሕ ክሪኻ ከለው ሲ ከም ዝሓድካዮም ኮይኑ ይስምዖም ኣሎ ብዙሓት ካ ጽርግያ ወፂኦም ንስኻ ከም ዝሓድካዮም እዮም ዲሞንስትሬት ዝገብሩ ዘለው ወይ ዝገልጹ ዘለው እስኻ ስንታይ መልስኻ ብዛ ከድካዮም ድኻይ ከሓድካዮምን
that Tigrayans had to come out en masse to defend themselves was the right thing to do. That I had to call on them to rise up to defend themselves was the right thing to do. But that as member of the leadership, we have...
ህዝቢ ትግራይ ንመሬቱን ህዝቡን ክቃለስ ወይ ድማ ንመሰሉ ክቃለስ ግዴታ ነይርዎ እዚ ቁኑዕ ነገር ይነይሩ
tells them miserably that I will carry to my grave is I am part of the blame. And the reason why I am trying to do what I am doing right now is to make sure that
ውድቀትና እቲ ናትና ስዕረትካ ኣነ ሓላፍነት ይወስደሉ እየ ምክንያቱ ኣነ ሓደ ካብቶም ነዚ ጉዳይ እዚ ሓላፍነት ክወስድ ዝግባእኒ ሰባት እየ
I atone for the kinds of mistakes we have done, but also I have to do everything in my power to make sure that that sort of miscalculation will never happen again. And the thousands of youngsters who paid their lives, that could have been avoided if we were insightful enough as the leaders.
እዚ ዘጋጠመኻ ጌጋ ምዃኑ ወይ miscalculation ምዃኑ ይኣምነ ንሕና ኸ ኣጸቢቕና ተዓዚብና ወይ ሓሲብና ልቶ ዝኾን ነርና እዚ ጉዳይ እዚ ኣይምመፀን
doesn't happen again.
All right, let's go to
ግን እንደገና ንኸይጋጥምካ ክንሰርሕ ኣለና
panel of experts here. I'm joined by Sidale Lema, editor of the Addis
ሰለስተ ሰባት እዚኦም ክሕቶትዮም ወይ ሕቶ ክሓትዎ እዮም ተፈላጣትዮም እዚኦም
newspaper. Were you surprised, Sidale, to see Getachew join Abiy Ahmed's administration? What does that mean for the victims of the war? He says he feels like he's atoning for things.
I think it's one of the
surprise ኮንክሪ ከነዚ ጌታቸው ረዳ ክትርእዮ ተመሊሱ ምስኦም ክሰርሕ ወይ ስንታይ ይስማዓኪ
greatest tragedies, Getachew. This is not just a moral collapse. This risks erasing morality altogether. You agree that a genocide took place, and it's not just a figment of imagination. You mentioned about, I would call it pragmatism, or working from within to solve this problem. And I think your supporters also say the same thing. What have you done so far? Have the people of Tigray been compensated, redress, justice? Have the federal government tried to incorporate, after you even came to it, incorporate...
ህዝቢ ትግራይ genocide ከም ደጋጦም ኢኻ ትዛረብ ንህዝቢ ትግራይ ክትከሕስ ግን እንታይ ተርሒካ ወይ እንታይ ጌርካ ኣለኻ ሳብ ሕጂ
into the federation? The answer is no.
Okay.
Is there any justice to the victims? The answer is no.
Bisrat Lamessa is an independent researcher, runs the think tank Nexus Forum for Research and Dialogue. Do you agree with Sidale's point that he may have joined the government, he may be trying to do good, but where are the results? What did you make when you heard the big news that he had come and joined Abiy Ahmed?
I don't...
እንታይ ተሰሚዕካ ጌታቸው ረዳ ምስ አብይ አሕመድ ክሰርሕ ጀሚሩ ምስ ሰማዓካ ከም ኣመኻሪ ኮይኑ
I agree with Adale, unfortunately. Well, one thing, it hasn't been designated as a genocide. This is a very sensitive concept that we shouldn't casually throw around. But when it comes to Getachew, I believe this is a very pragmatic move that has positive dividends at multiple levels.
مسؤول لا قون نزلا نساز بلوتو أنا يسامعني مهنياتو جينوسايد يخطب له أي جباني مهنياتو جينوسايد مخانو بلكع جينوسايد يزبلكم أكل يلن ويزقلوا فترة يلن سلازي شغلكم جينوسايد كتب له صبا يكون انتقال سبقليلو زسندو ويزدر بقالا يكونن انت خونا نا بقيتاجو رداغ ملس.
This is not a simple alliance between two individuals. People are rejecting TPLF's 50-year autocratic monopoly over the people's political civil.
بزحات حزاب ناي TPLF مريحنات reject يبلو له. سلازي جيتاچو ردا مس أبي أحمد صريح مالت جيتاچو ردا بينو يكونن. ناي جيتاچو ردا التحساسات سامعون بزحات علو. ناي TPLF أكايدان صرحن كازنوس بزحات علو.
And economic lives. They want a new political dispensation which is democratic, inclusive, open.
حدش ديمقراطاوي زغون سن حساب يدولي له حزاب زي منقد خسر حنت الاخوينخا.
And I believe such a move is an ideal opportunity to create an alternative space that will enable Tigray to renew itself from within.
زي جيتاچو ردا كم زي مقبارو حدش عدل وحدش سرح كفتر يخيل ينهز بتجراي ناب سلام دسفن كخون يخيل.
Makes the case for why you should be in there. Deal with Sadale's point that
إذا حجنسو نسخان أبي أحمد مخاركا كم دحان دخونه من قدي كم مراجي يزرع زلوا أنت خونه جن نايزا journalist.
You actually achieved being in government. What justice?
أنت أفريقيا لها نسخة جناب كم مخار خون كخبت أتوس أنت فريات غير كلها وين أنت أفريقيا.
I have to first respond to what I mean, you know, I'm not here to pontificate about moral. I'm one of those leaders who should be blamed for anything and everything that has gone wrong. But I also know that I'm one of the leaders who realized that going ahead with a kind of destructive.
تقولوا بتقرأ زقات أما شجرات أنا حلقتهم حلف تسوزنورك وحلفنت كوسد قديت علاني. أنت خلنا قل أنا حلفنت قديت عن سزلني نزي شجر زقات أما فتح ويد ما قعرخ قديت علاني.
Approach we've been following is not going to be in the best interest of the people of Tigray.
إن حزب تقرأ زتكم أكيد يكون نخيد زلنا وين خيد نيرنا سلزة أنا كغير جيتان يورني.
You achieved by making this big.
Oh, you mean since joining? I had long since joining.
كاب جنبر كايو ناي TPLF ناب أبي أحمد كم أما خارقون كحب سجرسي أنتاي أفريقاوي أنتاي جيركا سكان جراني.
Abiy Ahmed, I was the interim president appointed by Abiy Ahmed, and why is it that all of a sudden now I
مسجاجري president خوين خسر كل خقوب أبي أحمد تمريته.
I was ousted from Tigray, as it were, and then I come to Addis and I have to deal with Tigray issues. I still have to protect the best interest of the people of Tigray in any way I can, and then I have the opportunity to work with the Prime Minister, not as a policymaker, but as an advisor who would give his 5 cents.
Let's bring in Sheatil Tronville, is a professor.
كم مخارج خوين خسر كل خص بزح advantageات الله بزح طعمتات الله بزح حجاز نقرات كسر حقيقة.
Peace and conflict studies at Oslo.
يغيت عزيو بزح قالات الزارب سزولو لك عمهري قلطف سزول زولو أنت تلاقيهم تزخل.
New University College. He specializes in Ethiopian and Eritrean affairs. Getachew says he wants accountability and justice for Tigray and the victims of the civil war.
إسرائيل زلهم كأمونغو إيرتران تيغراين زل ركب فلات كويني قريب دالله.
War. Is the federal government he's part of, that he's a minister in, is it working towards that aim? Is it doing enough?
Well, we don't have any evidence for that as of now. They have put in place a so-called transitional justice mechanism to address the mass atrocities taking place in Tigray during the war. But that
Mongo تيغراين أمونغو أو وجه تيغراي زقات أما نت conflict وجه نوع نمعراي زي سرح أكل فاليوم على وانتو خنا نقصاب حجز رأني أنا قريب لين.
framework of so-called transitional justice is more aimed at not disclosing and not placing accountability on individuals, but diverting attention to other aspects of Ethiopia's long troubled history of human rights abuse.
أجي كندي بقندو زيوم أكلات نزفت أمي أميل كامتكاس نتجبن نام مسجار ويميلاي كاب رأس خامد حنز عينوت كاب نفسهم كاليوم سرح زلهم بربلك زيوم أكلات زفت إمام زيوم أكلات كهم زجيرهم سز بحق حتى اللهم زبلا عي رأنان أنت خونا ناب قدم ناي تاريخ إثيوبيا أنا مولسو زين دجبرة بتاريخ كله مولسو ينفتن زلوا.
So, as of today, we have no evidence whatsoever that the government is providing accountability for the mass atrocities.
No evidence whatsoever.
كساب حجي منجستي نزوم جبن زفتسمو تحتاتنا تكجبر يرانا والحد مسكرنت يبلنا و evidence يبلنا.
So that's pretty damning.
I agree with Shetel. Nothing of the sort has happened.
يسمع عمسو زوالو كل حكي.
The defense ministry has taken measures against some of low-level officials, and as long as I am able to convince or try to impress on the powers that be in Addis Ababa that none of the adventures 5 years ago are going to pay dividends, and then I will use that opportunity.
In 2019, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed won the Nobel Peace Prize for ending decades of hostilities with neighboring Eritrea. Abiy then partnered with Eritrea to fight against Tigray in the civil war. Today, however, there are rumblings.
بكلتشان عشرة شعتن أبي حمد مس إرترا سلام كلتشان عشرة شمونتن كلتشان عشرة شمونتن مس إرترا سلام جيرو كلتشان عشرة شعتن كأبي نوبل بيس برايز تعويتو انتو هنقنا بساعات زي أبي حمد مس إرترا
of a possible new conflict between these two countries. There are reports of Ethiopian tanks and artilleries moving towards the border. Both governments are accusing each other of trying to provoke a conflict. Is Ethiopia on the precipice of another war with Eritrea?
كمان بساعات زين أبي حمد مس إرترا وجه كجمر مخاني يزحم زلوا كلتيهم منجستات إرترا منجست إثيوبيا أن نحلهم يمزكاسسو أبي حمد استفلا عليه تانكتاتن أرمرتاتن دوباتي يسدد على زبل كستات على كحتى كالي زلوا إرترا مش إثيوبياس وإثيوبيا مش إرتراس وجه كتكبر سي تخيل ديا كمايو.
Put it that way. I mean, the whole rhetoric about Ethiopia's wanting to have access to the Red Sea is often conflated with the idea of ownership of a real estate, coal, asset, or whatever. As far as I'm concerned, there is no credible argument whatsoever to try and go against the sovereignty of Eritrea.
Are you saying that the claims of the Ethiopian government...
أجي بوزح زرباتات هلو. سو أنتايو منجست إثيوبيا سي حسب بحيل غزاي زبل ويكون عن زربان سمعنا. جن إرترا لولاي تهجرة. لولاي تهجر كا كت جهساي أي تخلنيها.
led by Abiy.
أجي أنت خاطب بالدليل خاص إسك أنا ترى بلغ حتى كان حساس معني.
We want access to that Red Sea port that's in Eritrea. You're saying that won't lead to war?
No. What I'm saying is I don't expect that to lead to war, at least not in the foreseeable future, as far as I'm concerned.
Prime Minister Abiy, on the one hand, has said he wants peace. He says he wants to avoid conflict.
ስለዚህ أبي أحمد بحري دلينا بحيلي أنت رأيلس وجا أصعب تبلده ما تزرعي إني نجاري إلا نفس ساعات زين أبقرب أوان وجا كهلو إليه حسبني أنا حرين قتل.
On the other, he's vowed to, quote, correct this historic error of the seaport and said, quote, I am 1,000,000% sure Ethiopia will not remain landlocked. The Ethiopian military said recently that it will not hesitate to make any sacrifice to secure access to the sea. How are those...
إزي ناي تاريخ جيجا يلوز قلت زلوا دكتور أبي أحمد نسخة ناي بحري أكسسي أنت بتي سكن رخبوينا كديتاس إثيوبيا 1,000,000% ناي بحري أكسس يقبع يزبلا تحساس بالله سراويت إثيوبيا أنكم زقلت زلوا ناي بحري أكسس استفعل ناي بحري بوتا نخنركب ويدما ناي بحري أفريقيا نخنركب استفعل مسوات خنكفل دلوقتي ناي لونيرم.
not threats.
So I have reason to...
إذا حجسي مفرح كوين دي سمع كان.
The Ethiopian military said recently that it will not hesitate to make any sacrifice to secure access to the sea. How are those not threats?
So I have reason to believe that President Isaias and Prime Minister Abiy will find it in their hearts to find a way to resolve, to defuse the crisis. Believe me. That's what I believe in.
Because believe me.
حد نقرأ كأمانني President إسياس أفوركن دكتور أبي أحمد كرتيهم كررالو انقسام عن مخانم سلام كجبر مخانم نقرأ كله أمانني أنا باللي بيكون ملي إذا أمن أمانة نقتبل كالحاكمي مالت كأيلم هدي حاسس الله.
This show is not about belief. It's about facts. It's about evidence. Do you have any evidence?
إذناتنا إزمة هذا الشو إزمة بزي بزعبة إمنني كأمنا كذا يكونه بزعبة حق تتابع تازول جبراوي إنه هنزارم دليل لازم إمنا كأمنا كذا يكونه سي أبجبري بحكي أنت يا خجاتم.
Do you have any evidence that you're ruling? You're saying there's no conflict.
جبت لك هذه نزلوا زلها زرقف.
Everyone who's worried about conflict right now.
I'll give you the facts. Okay. You know, I recently traveled to Afar region, all the way to Bure.
Yep.
And I saw concrete asphalt being built by the Ethiopian government.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Eritrean government also is building their side of the asphalt. So.
ناب عفار region كيدا نيرة عفار بوتا كيدا خلقها من قصة إثيوبيا ترجع يسرح رئة ترجع إرترا زي مرح. منجست إرتراون بمنجدو ترجع يسرح لنا أو زخيد. إذا نسلام زعل مريكونه؟
It must have been a recent fallout between the two sides. So if they have made that investment sincerely, and then I cannot rule out the two parties coming together.
People worry about the rhetoric.
سلام كجبر خوين يقعد سمعني ما هنعطوسي يزغلوا سرح ده أنت يسرح له.
Many would say this is not about a port. This is about expansionism by the Ethiopian government. Some have said that Abiy is, quote, obsessed with Ethiopia's imperial past, that he wants to march into Eritrea's capital and declare the Red Sea as his border. He wants to be celebrated as the leader who restored Ethiopia's greatness. What do you say to people who say that?
ብዙሓት ሰባት መንግስቲ ኢትዮጵያ ዝኸስዋ ነገር ኣሎ ንአብይ አሕመድ ማለት ንሱ ከዓ አብይ አሕመድ ናብ ኣስመራ ኣትዩ ኤርትራ ሒዙ ናብ ኣፍደገ ባሕሪ ክኸፍት መደባት ኣለዎ ዝብል ክስታት ኣሎ ብዛዕባ እንታይ ይዘረባ ኣለካ ወይ እንታይ መልስ ትህብ?
When I said as much in the past myself. Now the question is...
Those are all your quotes. You said he was obsessed with Ethiopia's imperial past. You said he wants to restore Ethiopia's greatness. Is that not what you believe anymore?
Well,
ቀድሚ ሕጂ ዝበልካ ነገር ኣሎ ንስኻ እንታይ እዩ አብይ አሕመድ በታሪክ ኢትዮጵያ ብጣዕሚ ቅዱስ እቲ ናይ ዓቢ ግሬትነስ ናይ ኢትዮጵያ ክመልሶ ይደሊ እዩ እዚ ከዓ እቲ ባሕሪ ኣክሰስ ወይ መንገዲ ምፍጣር ማለት እዩ
No, I mean, I don't have any problem with Abiy wanting to restore Ethiopia's greatness, whatever that greatness is. My issue is that sort of claim is not well.
Abiy Ahmed ድላይ ክገብር ኣነ ወል ሓን ፀጋም የብሉን ኢትዮጵያ ናብ ዝነበረቶ ናብ ንግስነት ናብ ልዕልነት ክትምለሰሉ መንገዲ ተፈጢሩ ፀጋም የብሉን ብዛዕባ እዚ ኮነ ፀጋም ኣነ ግን ደለን ፀጋም
is not likely to lead to the kind of conflict people fear is going to happen anytime soon.
At the time, when you said it in 2021, you said it would lead to conflict.
No, I didn't even say it will lead to conflict. That it will talk, I said he will take over Asmara.
I understand that's what you're saying. My question is, does that mean you no longer think he's an
ትብሎ ዘለኻ ይረዳእኒ እንዲ ብጣዕሚ ውዒድ ኾነ ዘረባይ እንካን ሃባን ኮይኑ ሶ ብሕፅር ዝበለ ክነግረኩም ስለዚ ስኻ ትብል ዘለኻ ሲ ኣብ ሰዓት እዚ ናብ ውግእ ይመርሕ ድዩ ኣይመርሕን ኢኻ ትብል እዩ የድሓትካ ኣለዎ
No, I think at this point in time he cares more about his image, that he's trying to make differences in domestic politics and all that. So I don't think he will risk the kind of expansionist approach that many people impute to him.
But many people being you.
ብዙሓት ሰባት ድልዎ አብይ አሕመድ በቃ ከስፋሕፍሕ እዩ ናብ ካልእ ሃገር ኢትዮጵያ ንኤርትራ ሕዛ ይድብሎ ነበረ ኢሎም ድኸስዎ ዝነበሩ እሷን አብይ አሕመድ መዲ ሓሰን ምልስ ኢሉ ንስኻ እኮ ኢኻ ከስፋሕፍሕ መደብ ኣሎ ነስመራ ከኣቱ ትብል ነርካ እወ ኣነ እውን ሓደ ካብቶም ዝብሎ ዝነበርክ እየ ኣብ ሰዓት እዚ ግን ናቱ ሬፑቴሽን ናቱ ኢሜጅ ንኽዕሪ ከምኡ ዝገብር ኮይኑ ኣይስማዓንን
But in fact, I went beyond that he will take over Asmara.
Okay.
He hasn't taken over Asmara.
Are you saying you were wrong?
Asmara ክሕዛ እውን ኮ ኢለ ነይረ ኣነ ግን ክሳብ ሕጂ ኣስመራ ይሓዛን ሓቀይ እንዴ
No, he hasn't taken over Asmara.
If war does break out with Eritrea, should Abiy give his Nobel Peace Prize back?
ምስ ኤርትራ ውግእ እንተ ደኣ ተጀሚሩ አብይ አሕመድ እታ ናይ ኖቤል ፒስ ፕራይዙ ክመልሳ ይግብኦ ዶ ይግብኦን
He could. Okay. I'm not sure.
ክመልሳ ይኽእል ኣይክእልን ኣይፈለጥኩን
What do you make of the tensions between Eritrea and Ethiopia? Getachew says, believe me, he's got some insider information. They're not going to go to war. Do you buy that? Are you worried?
አብይ አሕመድ ምስ ኤርትራ ውግእ ክፈጥሩ ይዝብሃል ጌታቸው ረዳ ብዝሃቦ መልሲ እመኑኒ ውግእ ኣይጅምርን ይብል ኣሎ ተኣምንዮ ዲኺ
I am worried, and I think a lot of people are worried. I think the fundamental problem of the tension today is the alliances that President Isaias Afwerki and Abiy Ahmed created a war pact, and when the Pretoria Agreement was signed, it collapsed. Now the two are looking at each other. But the problem is that I think the Prime Minister made it for the first time a few weeks ago when he said that what they want is a navy base. And it's not just a port access. And this ups the ante.
Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed ዝህቦ ዘሎ መግለፂ ብሕፅር ዝበለ ናይ ኔቪ ሓይሊ ባሕሪ ክፈጥር ይዝረል ዘሎ ከምኡ ኢሉ ተዛሪቡ ነይሩ
I want to bring in Traitor. You study conflicts. You know both these countries very well. Do you think war is inevitable? Do you think it's avoidable? Do you buy the should we call it complacency or positivity from Getachew here?
እዚ ተስፉ ዘረባ ናይ ጌታቸው ንኽንኣምን ወይስ ውግእ ክጅምሩ ኢልካ ክትሓስብ ኣብ ኢትዮጵያን ኤርትራን
I think the war is coming, and it's coming pretty soon. Ethiopia is now posturing and ticking off every box of claiming a right to self-defense, accusing Eritrea of destabilizing Ethiopia, accusing Eritrea of funding and arming militias, the Fano Amhara militias.
وأنا هم زرعني إثيوبيا مس إرترا وقت تقبر يا زبالة تحسس بعيد لنا معناته والحنت إن سلام زهق إنزر بعيد تقبر لان حدا نيرترا كم نيرترا تخصص الله من إثيوبيا نيرترا تلا تخصص الله ኢትዮጵያ ሕንፍሽፍሽ ትፈጥር ኣላ መንግስቲ ኤርትራ ሕንፍሽፍሽ ትፈጥር ኣሎ ኢትዮጵያ ኢላ ትኸሳ ዘላ ከምኡ ንፋኖ ትዕጥቕ ኣላ ኢላ ትኸሳ ዘላ
accusing Eritrea to collude with the Tigrayan government or the TPLF in Tigray.
ምስ TPLF ኤርትራ ትሰርሕ ኣላ
The Minister of Foreign Affairs in Ethiopia submitted a letter to the Secretary General of UN ticking off all of these issues, saying that we will be patient, we want peace, but we are not patient for too long.
should...
ናብ UN ድጽሓፍዎ መልእኽቲ ኣሎ መንግስቲ ኢትዮጵያ ንሱ ኻንታዩ ንሕና ሰላም ንደሊ እንዲና እንተኾነ ግን ዓቕሊ ክንገብር ንኽእል ኢና ነዊሕ ግን ዓቕሊ ክንገብር ንኽእልና እንተ መንግስቲ ኤርትራ ኢዱ ደይውፅዩ ውግእ ክንከፍት ንኽእል ኢና
war is coming and he's laying out that the Ethiopian government seems to be making the case for it.
While I agree with
ውግእ ክመጽዩ ዝብል ትሰምዑ ኣለኻ ኣብዚ እንታይ ነጥብታት ካ ዝሁሉ ይህባሎ እንታይ ይስማዓካ ኣብዚ
his analysis, what I'm saying is war is not necessarily inevitable. The reason why I don't believe war is inevitable is because the region has more than ample experience of turning things around and
what is the ዘሎ ሓቅ እንዲዩ እንተኾነ ግን እትናቶ ኣናሊሲስ ወይ ድማ አጋላልጻ አይቃወሞኔ እንተኾነ ግን እዚ ቦታ እዚ ቦታ ኢስት አፍሪካ ማለት እዩ አሞንገ ኤርትራ ኢትዮጵያ ደሎ ብዙሕ ናይ ውግእ ዝርአየ ኤክስፒሪየንስ ዝገበረ እዩ ስለዚ ውግእ አይደልን እዩ
erstwhile enemies.
Excuse me, Mr. Getachew. The region has also ample experience with war after war after war after war, relapsing to war more than creating sustainable peace.
Let me bring in.
ስለዚህ ጌታቸው ሓደ ነገር ነው ከደግመልካ መልሱሉ ማለት እዩ እዚ ቦታ ዝኮ እዚ ሪጅን እዚ ብዙሕ ውግእ እዩ ካብ ውግእ ስለዚህ ከመልኪ ኻነ ሰላም ይደል ትብል ሰላም ደልና ተባሃለና ውግእ ዘአቱ ዘሎ ተደጋጋሚ
Bisrat Lamessa, let me ask you, Bisrat, when Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says we will correct the historic error. The mistake made 30 years ago will be corrected tomorrow. It is an existential issue. That sounds like a guy getting ready to do
ታሪክና ከነተዓራሪና ክብል ከሎ አብይ አህመድ እንታይ እዩ ድብል ደሎ እንታይ ማለት እዩ ንውግእ ይደልዩ ደሎ ኮይኑ ስማዓካ
and also the Ethiopian people at large resent a flawed political process through which Ethiopia lost its coastal territories. So the Ethiopian government wants to sit down and discuss that with the Eritrean regime. Now this is the problem. Eritrea's aggression is not necessarily linked to Ethiopia's quest for access to the sea. The Eritrean government hasn't managed to capitalize on Eritrea's independence and create a functional state that is reliable, predictable, and has institutions. In 2018, the Ethiopian government tried to formalize the expression of interest in friendship into institutionalized agreements.
Well, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia in 2018 recognized the borders.
It was just the borders per the Algiers agreement, but it wasn't necessarily about making corrections to the historical strategic...
Dr. Abiy ስምምዕ ገይሩ እቲ ዝገበሮ ስምምዕ ናይ ቦርደር እዩ ብመሰረት አልጀርስ እቲ ቦርደር ናይ ኤርትራን ናይ ኢትዮጵያን ከም ሕንጸጽ ገይሩ
We are going to take a short break. In part 2, we will be back with Getachew Reda, with our panel of experts, talking about the Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, his record, his legacy, his human rights issues, and Getachew's relationship with him. Don't go away.
ኣብ ፓርት 2 ክሳዕ ንምለስ በዚ ኣይ ምሕጽነኩም እዚኣ ፓርት 1 ኮሚል ዝገጽሎ አይ ሆፕ ብሕጽር ዝበል ይገልጻ ፈትነ ፓርት 2 ኣብ ፓርት 2 ክገልጻ እንሎም ግን እዛ ፓርት 1 ተኣክለ ኣብ ፓርት 2 ካብ ቀጻለ ከምጻ አይኖ ብዙሕ ዝገበርኮ ጌጋ ሁሉ ክእል እዩ እንተኾነ ግን ብሕጽር ዝበለ ነዚ መስልቲ ዝገበሮ ኢንተርቪው ሪተን ቀፈታ እንተለኩም ኣብ ኮመንት ሰናይም ክታል ዝገርለተሎ ኣብ ኮመንት ባዕሎም ጽፎት ፈልኩም ኣብ ቀጻለ ክንዕረየና ሩማልቲ